What's up, my fellow lionesses and lions? Welcome to the Project Lioness podcast, where we are here to disrupt the mainstream narrative when it comes to health, holism, and human consciousness. We are here to share bold truths about health and life from a female perspective. This episode is brought to you by our team, Inspire Co., where we stand for your health being inspired by choice rather than being inhibited by chance. Thank you for being here and joining in on these raw, real, and powerful conversations. We hope our show brings you inspiration and empowerment to overcome challenges, reclaim your life, and ultimately pursue your mission with power, purpose, and play. Now, let's get into the episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Project Lioness podcast. This is your host, Dr. Mel, and I am super excited today. I am joined by one of my most favorite humans in the world, Dr. Giovanna. And today we are going to be having a lively conversation with you all about validation. And probably some tangents here and there, because you guys know how we roll, having bold, raw, real conversations. But before we get into it, let me share more about Dr. Giovanna and what she is up to on the planet. When did we first come in contact, Giovanna? Like 2021, 2022? Okay, so we've been in each other's worlds for a hot minute, y'all. So let me share more about this amazing, amazing woman, if my computer will let me go over to her bio. So Dr. Giovanna, if I would scroll over and actually be ready for this, because technology likes to do funny things. Dr. Giovanna Seitz has been a chiropractor, you guys, for a decade. Can you believe it? A decade. I'm sure that feels like a lifetime for you, Giovanna. Having completed certifications through the ICPA, which is the International Chiropractic Pediatrics Association, and Focus Academy, she has incorporated her work and this work into her practice since 2020, and we'll get into that today, and she can expand upon that. Dr. Seitz is passionate about helping families live their best lives through holistic lifestyle and embodiment practices. And in 2025, Giovanna is releasing her podcast, and I know you're stacking those episodes. Her podcast is Wildflower Life, to help support more people in their health journey, which I will include in the show notes, y'all. So welcome, Giovanna, to the podcast. I should also mention she is a Project Lioness Cohort graduate, and she is in my by the time this recording comes out, she'll be approximating graduating my Inspire Method Facilitator training. So without further ado, Giovanna, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Mel, and thank you for the kind words and great introduction.
Yes.
Happy to be here. I know this has been a little while in the making, but I'm glad to be here now.
Yeah, happy you're here. Like I said, y'all, Giovanna has been in my world for quite a long time, and we are learners of each other. And she's actually one of the main reasons why I have been able to evolve and turn a lot of the work that I teach into my own methodology. I remember when she's like, "Hey, when are you gonna actually like teach your stuff?" And I was like, okay, I guess it's time. So I have to give a lot of credit where credit is due back to her for inspiring me and encouraging me to put this work out into the world. So I appreciate you. Oh no.
Thanks, Mel.
There we go. So today, sorry, you guys, when I'm doing these episodes, I'm actually on my computer, and Giovanna knows this because she's creating her own podcast. There's a lot of moving parts. And when I'm not in the actual studio with someone, there's things to read and technology. So bear with me. As much as I think I know what I'm doing, I joke that I am a millennial boomer. This is no offense to you boomers out there. But sometimes technology does funky things. So here we are. So today, Giovanna and I wanted to talk about this concept of validation. And I remember, when her and I were speaking about this topic on one of our sessions, I said, this would be a really great podcast episode. So we're going to jam on this. And when you think about validation, some of you may already have, who are listening to this, you may already be having your own perception of what that is, how you maybe seek or don't seek validation. And so we're here in this conversation with Giovanna and I to shift the paradigm of what validation is, how it may be showing up in your life, and how to start to evolve it into something maybe a little bit more empowering. But Giovanna, tell me, I know you had written something down that I think is important to speak to, that you noticed was happening in 2020. more within like your people that you serve or your life? Can you expand upon that when it comes to this concept of like validation in the culture?
Yeah. One thing that kind of led us to that validation was we were talking about me wanting your approval, really. You were coaching me and I was being coached. And so I was like, is that right? Is that good? And it really got us thinking and got me thinking about how validation can be a good thing, but it also can be a toxic thing.
Yeah.
And to answer your question about what was going on, so it brought me back to 2020, all the people that wore the shirts that said, I'm essential. Of course you're essential, right? The people that were being told, oh, you cannot work. We don't need you. You're not essential. And how much that we as humans put our own identity, our own self-worth into how much we make and what we produce and our jobs. And so pre-2020, before all of that happened, I noticed that there was a lot of people saying, oh, you just have to have self-love and self-validation. Don't worry about what anybody else thinks. This is all about you.
It's common to say that like seeking external validation is toxic. And you and I in our conversation were saying, well, it's actually a homeostatic mechanism that's hardwired into our neurology, and how we will have these swings to help us bring ourselves back to equilibrium, and how maybe your seeking of external validation isn't necessarily all bad, and it's more of a feedback loop. So let's pick up there. And one thing I do want to mention and highlight that you said is that I think is very important that a lot of people will skip over is if you are working with, and we talk about this a lot in our facilitator training, if you are working with a coach or a guide and you feel the need to like impress them or perform or want them to like you, that is definitely something to be mindful of. And Giovanna and I had talked about this in our evolution of her growth and graduating into different ways of maybe working with me or not working with me. And I said, this is something to be like celebrated, but how often do people almost put on a facade or perform even for a coach, or if you hire a doctor or something, or a healer, whatever, because you want to be liked by them, and you hold your own authentic self back. And not saying you were doing that all the time, but her and I were really getting into clearing some stuff and asking like, well, what's the fear here? Right. And it's that, I want your approval. I want you to like me. I want to be validated by you. So let's continue. I think I just wanted to highlight that though, because I see so many people where they feel like they have to perform for the coach. And that's something I teach my facilitators, is making sure that your clients don't feel like they have to do that, right? And they get to show up as they are, even if it means there's some turbulence or discomfort, or a client graduates and they're done working with you, right?
Yeah, and that's something I felt throughout the whole coaching experience. One is that you're very relatable, very personable. Show us, the sides that make us feel like you're human too, right? And so that was always something it was easy for me to bring that up because you were so open to all of those things. So thank you for that.
Yeah, of course.
Back into the podcast. So we were talking about the swings and how we get balanced out. And I love your summary of that. So thank you for saying what I have thoughts in my head, just better.
I got you.
Yeah. Way to be.
Being a projector, human design comes in handy sometimes.
Yeah. Very, very good. So validation, if it's not our job, if it's not how much we make, if it's not self-love, if it's not, and I shouldn't say not only, if it's not only these things, if it's not other people telling us that what is it, right? And you had asked me this question, and when I looked it up, I had found that validation or validate was to make strong, to solidify or strengthen. And I would say, yeah, to solidify, strengthen, accept our identity, our person. And you sent me, I love how you break down the words. Do you want me to go over it? Would you like to say that?
Yeah. Giovanna and I were texting before this because she knows that I like to break down the etymology of words, and you guys know this, like what do these words actually mean? So I'd sent her a bunch of texts before this just because that's my brain. So yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So I love how you do this. And the way that you broke down validation was val, id, ation. So val, or like valence. So valence electrons is how I always put it in my head with chemistry, how that is a charge. And it can also be valid, value. So that's right along there with it. Id, or the ego identity, that fits right in with what we're saying. And then ation is a state of being. And I would also say action of. Yeah. So that, if you were to validate, you are having that action. If you are validated, that is your being has been solidified, or that identity has been given energy to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
you nailed it.
I've been around you a little bit.
Yes. Anna passed her test. I make my facilitators pass a test. So she passed that one.
Woohoo. And really, there's a couple different kinds of validation, right? I mean, there's self-validation, and there's other validation, people validating you. And as humans, we have emotions in different parts of our body. And then you asked me this question too, when we first started talking about this, of where is validation in the body? Mm-hmm. And really, it's an amygdala response.
Yes.
So amygdala is primitive brain, meaning this is what we use for our base survival. Mm-hmm. So this is what we fall back on when all else fails, all the higher brain thinking, all the socialization, we fall back to this primitive brain.
Yeah.
And if we're feeling that we need validation in our amygdala, that means it's essential.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And for those of you who, I think a lot of our audience knows Giovanna, but since you and I are chiropractors and studiers, learners, students of the nervous system, for those of you who don't know, your amygdala is like an almond-shaped structure in the brain that is really where a lot of emotional charges are held, and it is more of a primitive function. So when your prefrontal cortex, right, your executive center, your ability to make logical decisions and see both sides of things, when you feel as though you can't respond to the demands of life, we will default into lower structures. And as Giovanna is saying, to highlight this, what we're saying is that default is actually intelligent and necessary in order to survive. But what we're also speaking to is it doesn't mean that it leads to thriving. But so many people will say, well, seeking validation or these default responses is toxic, when in reality, it's actually necessary for survival, which we're going to get into. So maybe, just maybe, you're kind of like, oh, wait a second. So when I'm seeking that validation externally, that could be a clue or a curiosity that maybe there's something going on nervous system wise that can cue you back into your own authentic self, not to label yourself, not to judge yourself, but say, oh, interesting, I'm in a seeking behavior. I wonder what's happening, that I'm defaulting into more of my lower brain responses than actually staying in my, prefrontal cortex. But just to, for those of you who are like, what's an amygdala? That's a weird name. I might chime in and say that as Giovanna's spewing her wisdom.
Thank you, Mel.
Yeah.
So if we need it, what makes us need that, right? And so I think, and this is maybe my opinion, we can go on that, but I think it comes down to safety in your nervous system, which you just kind of said there about, if we don't feel safe, what happens? We end up falling into our defaults, right? Our primitive brain. And you talk about the 6 F's being our default. So fawning, fitting in, freeze, fight, flight, and fornication. Yeah. And I would actually say, as we get into validation, that it probably, the toxic side, and it's just a little preview for a minute here, is us trying to fit in.
Absolutely.
Because when we don't fit in, when we're not validated by others, we don't have the safety of the tribe. We're left alone. We have to fend for ourselves. And that puts us even more into that nervous system state where we have to be in our primitive brain in order to find our own food, get our own water, get our own shelter, take care of ourselves. And so I keep saying safety in our nervous system, and really to just kind of highlight that one a little bit, our nervous system is made up of a couple different ways that we navigate the world. And if we are not able to navigate by dipping in to one side of it, fight or flight, and dipping in to the rest and digest, we're not going to be able to do either one of those things very efficiently.
Yeah.
And so if our body's constantly stuck in, let's say, fight or flight, we're not going to be spending time growing good tissues. We're not going to be spending time reproducing. We're not going to be spending time digesting. So now you can kind of see there's all these little symptoms that can pop up: indigestion, infertility, all of these things that can pop up just because we don't feel safety in our nervous system. We're constantly in that fight or flight state. We are wired to be able to survive out in the wild. And so when we don't feel safety, we're thinking tiger. In all reality, it's probably more like a deadline at work, or I've got to get my kids to school. I've got all these tests to do. So those things come at our body, and instead of us seeing it as, oh, it's just another thing, it's not going to kill me, our nervous system says, wait a minute, I have to run from this. I have to get away or fight it.
Yep.
And so hopefully that explained that a little bit. If you want to chime in there.
No, I think that was beautiful. And, my brain is going to, so then when you said the word tribe, we are social creatures. And that's where I think people, when they talk about these, like fight or flight, sympathetic, parasympathetic is such a hot buzzword right now in the culture. And us chiropractors have been steeped in this for many, 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 many years. And I love seeing it. And I think there are some gaps to the ways people are talking about it. And what I heard you say in the concept of tribe, where the validation piece comes in, is like, well, yeah, if you don't feel, because humans are social creatures, even if you maybe don't feel externally extroverted, you're still a social creature, right? Community and tribe, as Giovanna said, is really important for our survival, because that's how our species survived for millennia, right? That's how our species got by. We are not isolatory creatures. We do better in community and tribe. And so in the process of validation, if you don't feel validated by self or other in even that amygdala response, you will feel that sympathetic tone that Giovanna is speaking to. You will feel that like fight or flight response of like, okay, well, if I'm not validating myself, or I'm not getting the validation from others, when you're in more of a stress response, that can create even more of a stress response and almost cause you to seek it more. Right. And we're specifically speaking to not necessarily prefrontal cortex where you've transcended your ego. Right. But when you're in more of that fight or flight state, it will be common for you to seek, and you can agree, or I'm curious your thoughts, Giovanna, you will probably seek validation more. But what we're saying is that's not bad. We want you to be curious about that. Like, oh, interesting. I'm seeking more validation externally right now. I wonder, again, as I said earlier, what's happening with my nervous system that I'm maybe operating in those lower default patterns.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. We're going to probably talk a little bit about this because I do have a personal story coming up.
Yeah, sure.
And this ties in of what our first tribe really is our mother, is our very close-knit family. And then we actually feel secure there. And then we can feel secure by validating ourselves. So really, other validation comes first in life, technically.
And what you and I, can I highlight that? Because this is something I think that was really like, when we were in our conversation, I was kind of like in meta world and mind blowing myself in our dialogue. So if you think about what we broke down earlier, valid, like bringing value to the ego or bringing charge to the ego, ID, if you guys study, Jung psychology, the ego is not necessarily in the highest part of the brain, but it's more midbrain. I would say. And a lot of people, when they're in these like spiritual awakening, they're like, dissolve your ego and let go of your ego and get rid of your ego. And I come in and I say, no, you don't want to get rid of your ego. Like, you need it at times. You don't want it to necessarily run the show. But if you try to dissolve your ego and transcend your ego and become a spaceless, timeless, formless being, well, you're living in a material world, and that leads to rapid collapse of your central nervous system, because you are a spiritual being living in a material world, and you've got to have the bridge. Like, that's just how it is. And you have these parts of your brain. So what Giovanna and I were speaking to many months ago in this conversation, just to highlight this before we get into your personal story, is the validation is literally when you're younger and that part of the brain is coming online, usually in like adolescent years, you are forming a sense of self. You are literally giving feedback and giving value and charge to the ego so that this person does have a sense of self in the world, which helps with boundaries. It helps with understanding rules. It helps with knowing where your body begins and ends, right? And so what I see in this, and why I think this is such an important conversation, is you cannot try to transcend your ego all the time. Sometimes it serves. That's what we're getting at here, is sometimes this serves in survival situations, or in, dissolve, or in integrating fight or flight situations. So I just wanted to highlight that, because that's what Giovanna and I in our conversation months ago were kind of getting at, was like, well, validation is literally like helping you create your form, but then eventually you do want to connect it to more your altruistic self, right? So curious if you have more to add to that, or anything that feels important to speak to that.
That was great. Really, we're talking a whole lot about validation and the healthy side, and how, maybe we need to swing towards that side of the pendulum a little bit more, but really we have to define toxic validation too. And I'm just calling it toxic validation. It doesn't actually, shouldn't call it negative.
Distorted. I like the word distorted.
That's a wonderful word. And that's where we talked about those 6 F's. We're kind of stuck in that nervous system a little bit. And I find that when we're stuck there, that's where we start to need that validation in other forms. And one form that, as a chiropractor, come across quite a bit is the form of needing validated by a medical professional. Mm-hmm. What's wrong with me? I need this person of authority to tell me what's wrong with me. Yeah. And oftentimes we try to get people back in their own body, and really, you have the power. Your body knows. We just have to figure out what your body's trying to tell us. Mm-hmm. And it also knows how to heal. But I find that if we don't really say what the definition of a toxic or distorted validation would be, then really defining what a non-distorted or a healthy validation could be is very hard. Okay. So we're not saying go out and let everybody else tell you so that way you can fit in, right? That's we're kind of leaning away from that. But as we are children and babies, that's where, our mom is pretty much all we get our validation from. Mm-hmm. Our close-knit family, that's the next where we get our validation from. And when we feel secure, when we have that safety in our nervous system, we get to start to grow a little bit of our own validation. Mm-hmm. And one of those things that happens, and you'll notice this in children when they start to play away from parent, they start to engage with other individuals. So we'll be able to see that trajectory of that self-growing in a child. And the other thing that goes along with this a little bit is judgment. Mm-hmm. And judgment has also this kind of bad connotation to it. And this is something I actually came to you with, was not wanting to judge people, because I grew up in, that's what you did, right? I like this, I don't like that, right? And so there is that judgment that's healthy as well, because we have to discern, we have to decide, do I like that? Mm-hmm. Oh no, okay, But where judgment gets a little bit distorted can be, now I'm going to treat that person differently because they have different clothes. Yes. Or I'm not going to get to know them because I judge the fact that I don't like their hair, right? Yes. So that's where it starts to get a little bit on that distorted end. And I really wanted to kind of say that before I talked a little bit about my personal story. I hope that was okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's good to define what we could call coherent validation and what is distorted validation, because there's two sides. Like, life is a paradox. Like, there's two sides. Well, there's more than two, but in the three-dimensional world, there's two sides to everything. There's a drawback and a benefit, we could say, to the process or the experience of validation or judgment. But yeah, I think to define terms as you go into, sharing your personal experience with this.
Yeah, just a very small tangent. And I love how you're helping me reword things, because words do have power. And so I love talking about this topic, especially because, again, judgy people, right? We don't want to have that, but yet we kind of need that. We kind of need that, right?
Yeah, judgment is never gonna go away. And you know this, becoming a facilitator, like, so many people try to avoid judgment, but you will experience judgment and receive it or give it when it is in conflict to your values, which we literally just talked about. Validation relates to maybe bringing value or charge and energy to something. So let's hear your story.
Perfect. I just thought I probably should give a little, this is my insecurity on this. So if my mom ever does listen to this, I love you, Mom.
Love you, Mom.
I love you. There's so many things that I had a wonderful childhood. I felt the love. I had all the things. But there's these things that I've learned now that made me kind of be like, that's why I'm doing this thing that maybe I don't like myself doing anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so when I was a young person, I was had a lot of lack of that self validation. So my mom was very good. We were together a lot. She gave me a lot of encouragement, a lot of love. But it almost got to that point where I didn't know how to do it myself, right? And so I clung to that. I did. It was always like, am I doing this right? So I looked to somebody else, read their body language a little bit, and say, okay, I'm doing this right. Like, multiple choice is my jam, because you can kind of see in the words, like, not that one, this one. Okay, I got this, right? Without even knowing.
In her facilitator test, don't give any free answers.
No. Not if you want me to know the information well.
Right.
But so that was kind of how I grew up, a little bit in that fight or flight stage for many other reasons, but this one as well. And I ended up having, in my teen years, where I'm trying to figure out, like, what do I want to look like? All the other kids kind of pick on me for this or do this, or that this is what they're doing, right? And so I was using my judgment, but then I would change something and my mom would let me know what she thought about it, right? And so, for an example, she told me one time I had mousy brown hair, right? And who wants to have mousy brown hair, right? So I started dyeing my hair blonde, and then it was too blonde, right? And then I started kind of doing a different direction, and we had rusty water. So then my hair actually turned red, and then it was too red, right? It's too long, it's too short, and I couldn't do anything right. And I did often feel like, well, just whatever, and throw up my hands in the air and move on.
Right.
And not in a healthy way, but just like, I can't make anybody happy. So self-esteem drops quite a bit when you're feeling like you can't even make the one person that's supposed to love you, adore you anymore, right?
Yeah.
And I do think that I developed a little slowly on the progression, so I'm in my teen years trying to figure this out, whereas I think a lot of kiddos start doing this a little bit younger. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
So this was something that we were doing, the method that you do in coaching. And you were helping me clear some of those charges, because now as an adult, I was getting angry, right? I was saying like, why would she do that to me? Right? How come she didn't know? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the other intellectual side of me was thinking, you know, she's my mom, she's human, right? She's not perfect. Not anybody is perfect. And of course things are going to happen. Of course she's going to do this out of my best interest. But we have these two little conflicting things where we're feeling this in my body of like, ugh, why?
Mm-hmm.
And feeling it in my brain of knowing, well, maybe not, right? Like there's reasons for it. So as I started to do the clearing with you, I started to come out of that freeze state. So when I'm talking about like, oh, I couldn't do anything right, that's basically a freeze state. That's giving up and just holding strong, right? And so as we were doing that, it's kind of neat to see, to take these words, validation, judgment, and start building that character of what I actually want in life, right? And just like you were saying earlier, okay, I'm wondering about validation, right? I sent Mel this email. Ooh, is this going to be good enough to talk about on a podcast, right? But then I thought, yeah, you know, I might want her validation. I might want her to say, oh yeah, that's great, let's do this. But I also feel like this is going to be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So this is me giving myself that like validation. In my body, it feels like strong spine, right? Open front. I love that you walk people through.
Yeah.
And it's more of a curiosity now, instead of like, ooh, I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't do that. Or feeling like, oh, I like that, but I can't do it, and all this stuff. Now I get to be like, huh, I wonder what I like, right?
Yeah.
I wonder how that person feels. If I'm judging that, I wonder what's going on in their life that make them choose that, right? So now you have this curiosity, this coherent type of judgment, this coherent type of validation where you get to say, yeah, I like that. Yeah, my tribe, my people that I choose to be around also like these things. How cool is that? So it's neat to be able to use that in a very coherent way to grow in the ways that best serve me. Really, that's really what we all kind of want, because that also fosters that safety in the nervous system, right? I got me, my tribe's got me, other tribes got my tribe. Like we're all together in this. So it just keeps getting bigger and bigger as we go on that. Any thoughts there?
Well, one, thank you for sharing your story and your journey, and what I'm hearing and what you shared, even in that brief moment of even just the stepping into sharing this on a podcast, right? Like you had sent me some topics which were, awesome. And even though for a moment you're like, oh, I hope she likes this, at the same time, like in that moment, or I don't know what the time in between was from that thought to then saying, and like, yes, maybe I want it to be okay for Mel because it is her podcast, right? Like that totally makes sense. It's okay to be like, hey, does this align? Is this going to work for you? But then the ability to be like, and I know in my body that this is going to bring value. And that moment right there, Giovanna, is so crucial that people, I think, often skip over, because that starts to bring the seeking, which is more the polarized, right? The amygdala, to like, oh, I hope she likes it, right? I'm going to distort myself just to fit in and be liked, versus like, yes, I want Mel to like agree with this for her podcast. And it's like the linking it to like your self-value that you bring to the world, to be like, and I know this is going to be valuable, right? It's that and that links it, that tells me there's more coherence in a system where you can hang in both thoughts or both experiences simultaneously, because in the middle, that's really where your power lies. To be curious, as you said. And we know the curiosity and the ability to ask different questions and say, I wonder, is totally in a higher part of the brain, versus like, oh my gosh, I hope she likes this, or like, oh, this is shitty, like I have to, do it all over, right? Versus, I wonder how this will land. Like just the ability to access wonder and curiosity is a form of what we're saying, this coherent self and other validation. Where then at the end of the day, I don't know, when you start to really work with this, and I'm sure you've had these experiences, at the end of the day, you realize it doesn't even matter, because what happens when you just get in cahoots with someone who, when they love themselves for who they are and they love you for who you are, then like that's where magic happens. And we could have talked about something totally different on this podcast, and it would have been of value, because we're in our own knowing of like, we bring value just by being who we are. And that's at the core of it too, that we talk about a lot, is everyone wants to be loved for who they are. Whether you have blonde hair or brown hair or red hair, like everyone wants to be loved for who they are. And that's the quest, I think, is back to your journey, is like, who am I really? Right? Beyond my mother's judgment, beyond my mom saying this is too much, this is not enough. Who am I at the core of this? Right? So that would be what I would reflect back to you.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's great, because I think about the statement. There's a couple statements that I really just love, and it's hurt people, right? But then helped people, help people, and empowered people, empower people, right? So there, and you can just keep going on with this, but really what it is this is my state of being, and this is how I resonate.
Yeah.
And my energy can affect your energy. And so you really just, your tribe is the people that you resonate with. It doesn't mean that you're exactly the same.
No.
It doesn't mean you like all the same things and do all the same things. It just means that together your resonance is harmonic, right?
I was literally just thinking the word harmonic. So we're in tune, my friend. And I think too, when you think about back to the tribe and community, like diversification can strengthen. Like we see that in genetics, right? You see that even with dogs, right? When a dog is more of a mutt, there's strength to, nothing against the purebreds, right? But diversification is the nature of reality, and the ability to be, when we use these words, if you guys are unfamiliar with like coherence or harmonic, harmonics are different tones and different frequencies that are aligning, not just the same tone all around, because that gets boring, right? Like just one note can get boring, versus harmonics are different notes that are starting to sync up, which comes back to that state of love. Like I can love Giovanna for the way that she shows up and her uniqueness. She can love me for the way that I show up. And will there be sometimes little defaults here and there? Yes, that's natural. That's what we're getting at here. And hopefully you guys are feeling this more in your bones, is it's natural to go into those things. And we're here to invite you to stay curious, of say, maybe I am choosing to fit in a little bit more versus being my authentic self. And when you can be your authentic self, as you said, that gives other people permission around you in your tribe, in your community, to be themselves from a place of love and I think acceptance and non-judgment.
Yeah, absolutely. And fostering that in other people's kind of interesting as well. Like I find that somebody will come in my office and they'll have a haircut, and, you know, I might like it or whatever, but the first question I ask is, do you like it?
Yeah.
Right? Because I could be like, well, that's kind of whatever. And they might just love it. But here we are not validating them, and they don't get to choose and do what they want. So I also say this for children. You might ask, like, what could my mom have done different? Right? Like, I don't want to change her. She has her own gifts the way that she is. But if we want to foster that coherent validation in children, perhaps ask them what they think of it first. You know, if they're of that age where you can converse this way, they're at that age where they're starting to develop their id. They're starting to develop their wants and needs. Yep. And so if you do state your opinion, because they might, you know, what if they don't even ask you your opinion, right? Well, then don't tell them.
Yeah.
Is it important? Is it going to change? I mean, safety reasons. Yeah, please don't run out into the street, because that's always helpful. But, oh, I don't like that outfit because of whatever. Okay. Did they ask you?
Right.
And so if they do, you can say, well, maybe I don't like that color, but I'm glad you do. Right. That's cool if you do. It's, you know, whatever you're choosing is great because you're building you. Right. And so with children, that's one of the biggest ones. that I would say if people were to ask me. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
No, I love that you brought that in, because we definitely have moms and people who are raising young lions and lionesses, and it can be so easy to be like, oh, I love your hair, I love your shirt, right? And sometimes I think we say that even when maybe we don't actually mean it, because it's a way of making connection. So we'll often give like a fawning compliment versus, because of our own need for connection, right? Like, I'm just going to make a compliment about someone's XYZ, even though deep down, maybe, you know what I mean? We don't necessarily like it, but that's where the social nervous system comes in to feel safe and connected. Like, oh, if I give Giovanna a compliment about the background of her, recording studio, which I do like, then she'll feel that sense of like, okay, cool, Mel likes it. That may mean that she likes me. So it's interesting, all this stuff in our brain. But I love that you brought in the kid thing, because it is important for kids to develop their own sense of self. Because at the end of the day, if Giovanna likes her background, then why the fuck does it matter what I think? And not that it doesn't, I shouldn't say it doesn't matter, but at the end of the day, I think it is important. Like, yes, develop the validation from other when you're developing, but then eventually create your own sense of self. And it's like, what do you like? What do you think about your hair? Oh, I love it. Great. And we can have preferences. It's okay to have preferences. Giovanna prefers lights behind. I prefer geometric shapes. And who's right or wrong? It doesn't matter. And there is no right or wrong. But yes, I do love that you brought that in, because that's so important, I think, for parents as they're raising conscious children, to allow them to say, yeah, I really like this. Well, why do you like it? Oh, because XYZ. Cool. That's awesome. Like, embody that. That's going to build confidence. And when a child feels confident, they can step away from the safety of the tribe. They feel confident in themselves, and they can step out into the world and take more risks. But the foundation is safety and connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of made me think, building that other or tribe validation in a healthy way, right? So we still want to be approved and accepted and loved. And that's where, like, oh, well, I really like that color on you. Or, hey, I was really impressed when you said these things the other day. It really made me reflect in myself. These things. And so, we still need to help other people understand that we connect with them and we like them and all of those things, because we still, as even whole healthy adults, we're still going to need that tribal acceptance, because there's always that swing going on. Yep. And so I would just invite you guys to open up a little bit more and don't lie, right? Don't say, well, I like that shirt when you don't, or I like that color when you don't, or, your hairstyle, it's great, whatever. I noticed you had your hair cut. How cool, right? I noticed this thing happened in your life. That's enough of a validation, is to be noticed by somebody these days. You can even go as far as to tell people you love them, right? Hey, Mel, I love you. You bring a lot of good feelings in my body, and you really complete a lot of my thoughts. So thank you for that. Right? So you can easily bring that in. I know it might be a little awkward at first, but that's something that, like, self-love, other love, it needs to happen. We need to be there for each other to continue that self-validation. So it's a never-ending cycle, even though when we're young, we develop these things. I do feel like it's something that we need to continue to foster. Yeah.
It's that balancing out, right? And it's what I'm hearing in what you're sharing is the word recognition, and recognizing people for who they are in that moment, knowing that as we evolve and love ourselves more, who we were 5 years ago, if you're on a path of evolution, it's probably changed. And so the acknowledgement of that person being their most authentic self, and that can look different day by day. It can look different depending on where you're at in your cycle. Like, let's be real. And I think to, wrap up our conversation, there's such a balance here, and it's important to remember that there may be things that you love about someone and like about them. And simultaneously, there's probably things that you don't like And it's important to acknowledge both sides because that's what creates balance and wholeness versus getting infatuated with someone. Like they're always nice and never mean. It makes me think of the movie Mean Girls, where she's like, oh my gosh, like I love, what did she say? Like that jacket or that skirt is so fetch. You know what I'm saying? Like Regina George, the mean girl. And then she walks away and she's like, oh my God, that's the ugliest skirt I've seen. Like that's not authentic. That's not authentic. That's a classic example of distorted validation. So anyway, had to throw in Mean Girls in there.
That was great. Yeah. And that's classic, and it's pretty, I don't want to say like obvious, but it's overt, right?
Yes.
Where like just saying, oh, hey, you got your hair cut, it looks good, right? That's pretty like benign, but really, is it? If you don't like it, then don't say that. Right. I noticed you got your hair cut. Cool. What do you think of it?
Yeah.
Even you don't have to say I like it.
Yeah. Shift. Yeah. The simple language shift is huge. Mm-hmm. So thank you for giving us some examples and practical tools. I'm big on, when I have guests on here, giving some practicality for people who are going out in the world, who are living more of bold, raw, real truth. So as we wrap up, Giovanna, is there anything else that feels important to close in this conversation? And then I'll ask, where can people connect with you, your content, your podcast, that type of thing?
Sure. Other than just thank you for having me on, and thank you all for listening to me talk and listening to my story. I know it wasn't a huge in-depth story. Know that there's lots of different moving pieces there, as I'm sure you all have your wonderful life stories that have taught you so many great lessons. So lean on those lessons and love yourself and everybody else.
Yeah. And regardless of what you have, one of my mentors, John D. Martini says, regardless of what you've gone through or you haven't gone through, you are worthy of love.
Yes.
So where can people find you? I know you've got your podcast have you launched it yet, or are you stacking episodes? Okay.
I'm still stacking episodes. Yeah, that's happening. Okay. When it does launch, it'll be the Wildflower Life podcast. It should be on Spotify and YouTube when it happens. And my hopes is when this comes out, it will be, but life is what it is. Mm-hmm. Things will happen as they're meant to. And other than that, I am on Facebook with my chiropractic business. So Wildflower Family Chiropractic is my business name. And so I have a website and both the Facebook, and you can connect with me on either of those. And yeah, for now, that's it.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you, my friend, for being here. Thank you for sharing your journey and your wisdom as always. I know you always spark a lot of deep thoughts in my brain that keep me on my toes and keep me evolving. So I appreciate you so much. And it's such an honor to guide you and see you evolve and become more of who you are. And you know this, but I do not take that doulaship of knowing thyself and expressing thyself lightly. So I am very grateful to serve you, and thank you for coming on and serving my audience today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mel.
You're welcome. All right, you guys, until next time, catch us on the next episode. Share this with people you know who are going through maybe a process of dissolving their paradigms of validation, and invite them into this conversation. Until then, we'll see you next time. Peace, love. Keep inspiring. Bye.
Thank you for joining the Project Lioness podcast. Did you find value in today's episode? Help us impact the lives of others by sharing this podcast with someone you know who would resonate and benefit from the Project Lioness message. Excited to hear more? We invite you to subscribe on whatever platform you're tuning in on. And we'd be so grateful for you to leave us a review about what you enjoy most, as well as what you'd like to hear more of. Thank you so much for all of your support. Sincerely yours in power, purpose, and play. Dr. Mel with the Project Lioness podcast. Keep rising, keep roaring, and keep inspiring.